On today's World Insight,
Not guilty.
sharp divisions in U.S. public opinion over the acquittal of Illinois teen Kyle Rittenhouse. Justice served or justice denied? And closer relations between big trading neighbors China and ASEAN with a comprehensive strategic partnership. What does it mean for free trade deals like RCEP and regional growth?
It will create some new opportunities for member states to collaborate together.
Here's our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei from Beijing. We begin today's program with reactions over the acquittal of 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse for shooting 3 men in a Wisconsin protest. Last week, a jury found the Illinois teen not guilty on all charges. Rittenhouse shot and killed 2 protesters and wounded a 3rd in August 2020. His trial has sparked debate across the U.S. over gun rights and self-defense. Rittenhouse brought a semi-automatic rifle to the protest, saying he wanted to protect business when violence erupted over the police shooting of a black man who was left paralyzed. The case drew sharp divisions among Americans whether people have the right to act as vigilant with guns. For more, we are joined by Professor Hagel, Timothy Hagel, Professor of Political Science with the University of Iowa. Professor, good to see you. We are also expecting another partner another panelist in the discussion, and we are still waiting for her right now. But let me go to you, Professor, first. Your quick reaction to the latest decision by the court.
Well, it's the decision by the jury, and the jury basically looked at all of the evidence. The prosecution tried hard but didn't have a good case, and the defense was able to sow what's called reasonable doubt, which means that the jury thought that Rittenhouse did in fact act in self-defense, or at least there was reasonable doubt that he could have been charged with murder, and therefore they found him not guilty.
How about your personal reaction to that?
Well, one of the things that I thought, and I've seen a number of other attorneys talk about this too, is it seemed like the prosecution had an extremely weak case from the start. And prosecutors have the luxury usually of weeding out weak cases when they think that they're not going to win. But unfortunately, in a highly charged political environment like this, that the prosecutor probably had no choice but to bring those charges, and as a result ended up, as I said, with a weak case, and it was relatively easy for the defense to poke holes in it and sow that reasonable doubt to make the jury believe that Rittenhouse really wasn't guilty of first-degree murder and the other charges.
It might be a weak case in terms of the charges. However, it started a huge discussion once again in the United States about gun rights and gun violence. Professor, you have students and you know how that is being discussed on campus as well. Tell me more about which stage are we in now about this discussion?
Well, unfortunately, I think we're in a stage where nothing useful is being discussed. And that's partly as a result of several issues being conflated and being pushed together. And really, we need to some extent, separate them. Now, sometimes issues do go together under certain circumstances, but this seems to be a situation where people wanted to use this particular case to talk about race rather than necessarily the question of gun rights, or the fact that under the current law in the state of Wisconsin that the young man was legally able to do what he did in terms of carrying a weapon and so forth. Now, of course, the things escalated and people died as a result, and then we had the charges and so forth. But what's going on with the racial aspect and the protests is separate from the idea of just in general gun rights and so forth. And when you start pushing those issues together, it becomes even more confusing, and especially if you have a media that isn't really necessarily able or even perhaps willing to separate those issues and be able to talk about them in a reasonable way. Now, it's a discussion, especially on the gun rights issue. It's been a discussion that we've been having in this country for a long time. And it's unfortunate that when something happens, whether it's in favor of one side or in favor of the other side, that then all of a sudden it blows up and people really can't even talk about it because of the intensity of the particular situation.
Professor Hagel, you said something very interesting. I think we might discover more about that, about the entangled issues together. None of those have solutions now, even though people are working hard to find solutions. Now, when they're entangled together, it's very hard to people to find priorities, for a social discussion, priorities, even when it comes to one specific criminal case. Now, Professor, how do you see the fact that these are entangled together? Were there precedents in the United States that when you have entangled social issues, there were ways to find out where to go first and how can we separate them while at the same time be able to have consensus on all of them?
Well, it's difficult, and I can't point to any particular instances right off the top of my head, but the idea would be is to try to find a way to address these issues at a time when you don't have that intensity that's going on right when you have, for example, a trial that's occurring, or when you have immediately in the aftermath of something that terrible that happened, either a shooting, a mass shooting of one sort or another. Now, some people think that that's exactly the time that you need to talk about these things. Well, in some circumstances, or to some extent, that's true. But on the other hand, that's also not necessarily the time when you can try to find some sort of solution to find whatever the problem happens to be. And of course, part of the problem is that not everybody sees exactly what the problem is. And that's particularly true, I think, in the area of gun rights in the United States.
Professor, the reason we talk about it is not only it happens to the Americans, it's also happening to those who are in America and with other nationalities. For example, Chinese students, you might know, a recent case in the University of Chicago, a very well-respected university. However, he is an outstanding student. He has great relationship with his classmates and schoolmates, and yet he was shot dead on his way to get lunch. And there were enormous protests among the students at the University of Chicago. The president of the University of Chicago came out together with the heads of a police department and others. People are so searching, but still there's no solution. People are genuinely asking the question, what did the kids do wrong? Why do they deserve this? I remember the mother of the kid who was shot dead said it was her first trip outside China. She never traveled outside China. Her first trip outside China is to go to the funeral of her son. Now, that's a very sad story, but it once again brings us to the debate about what's going on.
What's going on in Chicago is a whole different problem, I guess. And it's one that, unfortunately, those who are in favor of more limitations on the ability to own guns and so forth tend to not recognize, or they tend to ignore, because it's an ongoing problem. Unfortunately, every weekend, every Monday, as it is here where I am, that you get a report as to how many people were shot in Chicago, how many people were killed. And Chicago has one of the most limiting areas for gun ownership. It's very difficult to get a gun. Now, the mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, has said that, well, the problem is actually Indiana, a neighboring state, because people can go to Indiana, bring in guns legally to Illinois. And I'm not sure that's necessarily true, because the problem has been ongoing in Illinois for a very long time. And basically, the people that are saying that, oh, this is terrible, these terrible things happen, these shootings happen in whatever place it happens to be, then don't focus on what's going on in Chicago. And then you have occasionally a situation that does break out where somebody who seems to be an innocent, completely unaware of the gang violence or not associated with that, an upstanding student, as you say, at the prestigious University of Chicago, and then now some people are paying a little bit of attention, but even that story doesn't last very long, because it's Chicago and it's run by the people who want to limit gun rights, and yet their city is plagued by this kind of violence. And so again, that makes it difficult to find those solutions when you don't have people have these diametrically opposed views as to what should occur.
Even though there are diverse views about what to happen next, the lives are lives. They should be treasured, as we all recognize. So what's the solution? Let me also go to Saha Aziz, professor and director of the Center for Security, Race and Rights with Rutgers University. Good to see you. I know you're on the phone. Tell us more about your thoughts about Rittenberg, what's going on there, and also my latest question regarding the Chinese students from University of Chicago. Even though very two different cases, and yet, once again, the question about gun violence in the U.S.
I think the Rittenhouse case shows that when white people own guns and use them in a lethal manner, they are presumed to be innocent insofar as having good intentions. In other words, Rittenhouse was given the benefit of the doubt that he was there to protect the businesses, that he had a gun for good intentions, whereas when black people own guns, the way that Americans are socialized to perceive that is that they're up to no good, that they're likely to be criminals or gangsters or drug dealers. And therefore, the social norm is to presume that they are not supposed to own the gun, and if they used it to kill someone, it was probably illegal. So Rittenhouse certainly benefited from that because one of the victims was unarmed. And so he didn't even have a gun such that at least facially, there was no appearance of a reasonable expectation or reasonable fear of imminent lethal harm, which is when self-defense is justified.
Okay.
The second person who was shot, he was using a skateboard. And the third person is the one that you have a stronger case of self-defense because he actually did have a gun.
All right. So you think this is rather a racial connotation very much over there. Professor Hagel has been waving his head. Of course, we see this division of opinions already between our two panelists. Professor Hagel, very briefly.
Well, those comments are part of the problem, is that if immediately that you're going to look at this and tag it in terms of black and white and all this sort of thing, that it doesn't help to solve the problem. In fact, it makes it worse. And interestingly enough, on the exact same day that Kyle Rittenhouse was found not guilty, there was a black man in Central Florida who was also found not guilty for shooting at SWAT officers who had attacked him in his home. And he was a felon with a gun. He had it illegally. He wasn't supposed to have it, but he had it. He used it in self-defense and was able to then be acquitted because the police officers did not follow proper procedures, and his girlfriend ended up dying as a result.
So many cases in the U.S., it's hard for anyone from outside the country to, to follow every violent case and the gun cases. However, the question that I raised earlier, Professor Aziz, is also very important. International students in the United States already feeling unsafe more and more over the past few years. And we heard that the percentage of international students in the United States applying for U.S. universities has been dropping 30 to 40%, even as big as that. Some could say the number is a little bit exaggerated, but that shows the trend. So, Professor Aziz, as a professor yourself, how do you see this?
Well, I think much of it is dependent on I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? Because unfortunately I came to the show a little late.
Yeah, sorry. That earlier there was a case of Chinese students from the University of Chicago being killed. He's a great student. And I asked Professor Hagel also about that because what his mom said at the funeral of this young man was extremely touching. She said this is her only first trip outside the country of China, first trip abroad, and it was going to the funeral of her son. So people wonder, whether the U.S. is still the place to go, Chicago is the place to go, or Central America is still the place to go for international students. So what about the gun violence in the country? How to deal with that? Do you have a solution or not? How can we answer the questions coming from parents?
Right. Yeah, I think that there is certainly a problem with regard to attracting international students and visitors if the perception abroad is that our society is not safe, that you cannot be in public and not be concerned about being shot, particularly by people who own guns.
All right. It seems that we are losing the connection to Professor Aziz, who is on the phone. Before we go, Professor Hagel, so how do you see this debate in the U.S. go on? And when is debate going to be translated into actions?
That's a question I think a lot of people would like to know what the answer is,
Yes.
Because these debates have gone on for a very long time and seemingly without any solutions. And it's very difficult because the sides seem to be so polarized. And unfortunately, we are living in a time these days when every issue becomes immediately polarized, and it's hard to find any kind of common ground, whether you're talking about extremely serious things like the shootings that happen, or even more mundane things such as spending, which is also very important. But when you have that immediate polarization, finding solutions becomes that much more difficult.
Timothy Hagel, thank you so much for joining us from the University of Iowa. Earlier, we also have on the phone Saha Aziz, professor from the Rutgers University. Thank you so much for both of you. Next, on the program of World Insight, closer relations between big trading neighbors, China and ASEAN, with a comprehensive strategic partnership. What does it mean for free trade deals like RCEP and regional growth? Answers from an international trade executive.
The world is changing fast, taking all our lives with it. But we can change it too, by seeking answers to problems through discussions and debates. On World Insight, I ask direct questions to real people in the know, seek genuine answers, but respect diverse perspectives. Our live global debates tackle the most critical issues head-on. World Insight with Tian Wei go beyond the headlines.
Welcome back. This is World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live. A new milestone in relations between China and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. Chinese President Xi Jinping has announced the China-ASEAN Comprehensive Strategic Partnership at a virtual summit commemorating 30 years of China-ASEAN dialogue relations on Monday. He says it will inject new vitality to the region and the world. China has been ASEAN's largest trading partner for 12 consecutive years, the volume swelling 85 times since starting dialogue relations 3 decades ago. With 6 ASEAN members on board with the world's biggest trade pact, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, also known as RCEP, will officially take effect on January the 1st, 2022. The free trade deal is expected to fuel regional-wide economic recovery and the need to shore up post-pandemic supply chains. On this, earlier I talked to Zhang Shaogang, the Vice Chairman of the China Council for Promotion of International Trade. He participated intensively in the negotiations leading up to RCEP. Take a listen.
The RCEP is the combination of 5 existing ASEAN FTAs with its trading partner. So within this new scenario and architecture, there are many new elements have been inserted into this process. The other issue is not only a physical reaction, it's going to create a chemical reaction. The most important...
I love that word.
The most important effect, in my opinion, will be the full integration of our significant and the largest market involving in the 15 countries, the member states. So I think the chemical reaction will come from this emerging market. So all those elements put together, you will see a very integrated, largest market in this world. And I could say in this new market, all the rules will be unified. So maybe in other words, in the past, you have to follow country by country's rule. But now you need only to have one driver's license. that will lead you to move freely among all the 15 countries.
That sounds absolutely enticing. But if you think about how much synergy, as you said, chemical reaction, this could create and the impact one could have toward the other, not just about the numbers, but also about how things are being done. That is going to be tremendous in a way, Mr. Zhang.
Indeed, the membership of RCEP is quite diversified. It involves some very advanced economy like Japan and Korea, and also it includes some LTC country like Laos, Cambodia, and so on, so forth. I think this is just the merit of the China-ASEAN FTA, because it creates a new pattern that can demonstrate an FTA can bring the economy at different level together. So I believe maybe it can create a new path for all the countries in this world to move ahead hand in hand. On the other hand, I think in terms of the level or the strength of this FTA, I think to compare with those existing FTAs, RCEP involve or incorporate a number of new elements. For example, the electronic commerce. It is one of the most comprehensive article containing in this new agreement. Not only for the traditional part like privacy, electronic signature, so on and so forth, it's also involving some tendency with regard to the free data flow and the server allocation. So that can bring about some new thinking and new way to guide the cooperation among those 15 countries, and maybe it will create some new opportunity for member states to collaborate together.
Now things are getting a little bit more complicated in terms of geopolitics. So as someone who negotiated from day one, at that time things were not as it is today. Are you worried?
Not exactly. During the negotiation process, and even after the signature of this agreement, all the 15 countries are very keen and enthusiastic about the early entry into force of this agreement. The difference of ratification process is simply because the different countries have different procedures. But to my knowledge, all the 15 countries want the early ratification.
What business communities telling you from different parts of the world about how they see RCEP and how do they see the future of trade? What does that mean to them?
Actually, after signing of this agreement, the CGTN, the organization I serve, have maintained the closest contact with our counterpart in other RCEP member states. And actually, we already organized several symposiums and seminars to say how we can welcome and embrace the upcoming RCEP. To my communication with my counterpart in the other countries, I think they are very serious about the upcoming RCEP because number one, they believe the RCEP will bring tremendous trade and investment opportunity for themselves. So they want to take the advantage of it. This is a very starting point. The second point is that they like the new rules very much, because to compare with previous FTA, because it signed many years ago, maybe it's not so closely to keep their pace with time. But the RCEP is the most updated agreement among 15 countries. It involves a lot of new set of rules which can guide our cooperation under the current circumstance. So they think this rule will take effect and it will it will safeguard our cooperation in a very smooth manner.
Just to report to you, Mr. Zhang, I've been talking to various scholars and also experts coming from the area of RCEP countries. And everything when they said about the future relations, the first thing they talk about is RCEP and the possible trade volume and investment volume we could have toward one another in the future. When you ask that, people have light in their eyes. That's something amazing at this moment when we see so many changes in the world. I'm sure you had the same feeling.
Yes, indeed. You know, both you and me attend the China-ASEAN Expo. By definition, China-ASEAN Expo is 10+1 Expo. But what I heard most is not about the China-ASEAN, but RCEP. So I really feel a little bit worried about that, and I'm thinking.
Why do you worry? You should be very proud because you participated from day one of that negotiation.
As a matter of, I'm even thinking whether we need to consider to expand the size of China-ASEAN Expo to rename it at a RCEP Expo.
That would be a great idea.
Certainly, that's my personal opinion. We need to consult our ASEAN colleagues to see whether it is feasible. Or maybe we can create a new platform to accommodate RCEP.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, there are many ways to address this issue. And I think, indeed, given the deeper liberalization and safeguarded by the new rules, RCEP will indeed create a tremendous trade and investment opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zhang. As always, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching. Bye for now.